1320 WILS, I'm Michael Cohen. You know, the justice system may appear as though it's working from the outside, but for those who have gone through it, they have a very different perspective. My next guest experienced it in his own life, spending 7 years of his life in prison. He's now written a brand new book, Justice Restored, 10 Steps to End Mass Incarceration in America. Howell Woltz joins us here on 1320 WILS. Howell, great to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me on the Capital City Recap.
I want to get into your story. You're joining us from Poland. Have you decided not to live in the U.S. for some reason?
Yes, it's a little bit uncomfortable there for whistleblowers and people who speak truth to power. I have learned the hard way. And in fact, they have indicated that was why they initially attacked me back in 2006. And when I began doing, TED Talks and speaking on radio and all over America, I got physical threats from U.S. Marshals from North Carolina and others that if I didn't shut up, as they said, they would do it again. So I found that it's just safer for me to live. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I'm living more free and safely in former Eastern Europe Soviet bloc nation of Poland than I was living in North Carolina as recently as last year.
Are you getting threats from U.S. Marshal officers? Did you report that?
Well, yes, but they were sent by a federal judge in Raleigh, North Carolina, about whom I had written. So federal judges are immune as long as what they do is while they're on the clock, they can do anything and everything. This particular judge committed 56 federal crimes in one case alone, but he's still on the bench at 85 or 86, and there's absolutely nothing one can do to dethrone a sitting federal judge or federal prosecutor absent, drugs and infidelity to their wives. It seems taking advantage of American citizens is no longer considered a reason for their removal.
Tell me this, Hal. I want to understand. In your case, what were you doing then in 2006 when the FBI basically raided your home?
Well, I've been a journalist and spoke publicly since 1977 about the impending loss of freedoms in America. But to pay the bills, I also was in the financial industry and had a client that this particular judge, in fact, was after his old nemesis, who had been another judge and a U.S. attorney in North Carolina, famous politician. So it was basically a political vendetta that I got caught in the middle of, and they asked me to come and answer some questions about a financial report I'd written about, the guy. I said there's no criminal conduct that we're aware of, but they refused to give source of funds information, so we have terminated the relationship. So years later, they say, well, we want you to talk to us about this. But when I came to North Carolina to talk to them voluntarily, they kidnapped me and said, well, here's what you're going to say. I said, but this is untrue, and it happened long after our relationship ended. So that was my introduction to the system. And they said,
how did they end up getting you into prison for 7 years then?
Well, that's it. I was never convicted in or by any court of jurisdiction. And during those 7 years, they moved me 29 times all over America to secret prisons, closed jails that had been abandoned as health risks, but the feds were still using certain sectors of them. I mean, it's absolutely bizarre. It's like this underground world. And every time that my attorneys or family found out where I was, whoosh, I was off again. It is just absolutely unbelievable until you've been there.
Why were they doing this? Why would they put you in that position, and how could they keep it going for 7 years? That's insane.
Well, that's a very good question, which is why, my case has been overturned completely, and we're now going after them, because they're not supposed to be able to do these things, but they have done them. And during this, this diesel therapy, as they call it, all over America, I met thousands and thousands of people and began seeing just how grossly destructive of our constitutional rights this whole system has become.
They were trying. I just want to clarify. They were trying to force you to falsely testify about a man who this judge didn't like. Is that it? Correct.
This politician had tried to keep him off the bench in 1980, and And I don't know how much you know about North Carolina, but politics is still a blood sport down there. They have long memories, and our last few governors have all faced either indictment or been charged with felonies. They play dirty down there. So this judge, it was time to get even, and I was supposed to be the smoking gun. When I refused to do it, then I was ridden around, and every few months they would take me back to Charlotte, North Carolina. So you ready to say what we tell you to say now? And I would say no. So they put me on the road.
So
again.
How is your lawyer not able to intervene? Because that sounds unconstitutional in some ways.
Well, it is, but as I say, this judge committed 56 federal crimes of this nature during this case alone, and nobody will do anything about it. But the attorneys weren't able to even find me for weeks and months at a time.
We're talking to Howell Woltz. His book is Justice Restored, 10 Steps to End Mass Incarceration in America. Well, what do you think of America, then, after going through something like this?
I absolutely love America more than anything in the world. What I do not like is what our last century of presidents and political hacks have done to a constitutional America. And that is the problem, Michael. There is no force on earth that can force these federal officials especially to follow the law. And I worked on over 400 criminal cases during that 7-year journey, helping others try to get their cases overturned or get back in court or get due process of law, and was shocked because I saw the similar pattern of prosecutorial misconduct and or judicial misconduct, as was in my case, in almost every one.
Well, but those that believe on the whole the justice system tries to prosecute the right people and imprison the dangerous people, what do you say to them?
I'd say, why don't you spend a few days in a county jail and you'll get over it in a hurry.
Are you saying
that is the problem?
Okay, so your view is what? Are you saying most people in the system are actually not guilty in some way, or?
Well, I don't have to make that assumption or a statement because the U.S. courts reviewed 5,760 cases, as was recently published by Columbia Law School. Of these are capital cases where the intent of the prosecutor and the judge is to, kill the person under sanction of in color of law. And out of those 5,760 cases, detailed review at federal and state level, they admitted to a 73% overturn rate because of violations of law by the courts and prosecutors, and found 9% of those people had been actually innocent when they were put on trial. So the courts themselves, when they're intending to kill somebody, have admitted to this horrendous, 83% failure rate in getting it wrong.
Now, why is that happening? Why is the system so flawed in your view?
Well, because in my short 63 years, I've watched the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, and Eighth get basically trashed. They can invade your home, shoot your dog, steal everything you have in the house. They can, cause you to forfeit assets. There's about $4 billion in private assets taken last year without a charge. They then put you in jail, and rather than following the federal law, which requires you to be tried in 70 days, also the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution, I've never seen that happen once. You must be released in 90 days. That's also federal law, 18 U.S.C. 3164C. Never saw it happen in a single case. So what they do is throw people in jail, keep them in these horrible county gladiator schools, as we used to call them, because it's just terribly violent, dirty, and disease-ridden. And then the prosecutors come to you every few days or weeks and say, okay, you're ready to plead guilty to something now, and we'll let you out. Well, out, though, is to go to prison. So, but it is so bad that people generally, after weeks, months, or years, I worked on some cases where people have been in these horrible places for 5 and 6 years, where the law required them to be tried in 70 days or released no matter what they were accused of in 90. So that is the issue. It's the due process of law no longer exists. The prosecutors in court.
Let me ask you this. We're talking to Howell Woltz, by the way. The book is Justice Restored. So how did you not, after 7 years or within 7 years, how did you not yourself give in and agree to the judge's wishes?
Well, I was never taken back to the court of jurisdiction, for starters. I never saw it again after it released me on unsecured bond. The judge called the prosecutor's story, said, "This is bizarre. Let these people go. Unsecured bond right now." Instead, they grabbed us again and took us to this judge who was behind the vendetta, and he sent me, first of all, to a private prison owned by judges in Virginia, and which is a bizarre story in itself, held me until there was no time to appeal what he had done, though illegal, and then I was ridden around for all of those years. And every time I started filing too many cases or getting comfortable, I was moved. But again, it's
what does that? Yeah, what does that do to you, Howell? I mean, when you came in, as compared to what you were like after 7 years of this experience, how did you change?
Well, I was very angry. Obviously, I mean, you can't go through something like that without really having it test you. But that's why this recent book. This is my fourth book now. You know, the one about my own story that made a film about it, Justice Denied. Yeah, it was pretty angry, but I sold a lot of books, and a lot of people read what was going on, and the foreword was written by a federal judge who reviewed the entire case, so nobody could say it was wrong, and all the facts were taken directly from docket sheets and public records, so it stood up to scrutiny. But what I'm trying to do, Michael, is take that horrible experience, because life is fantastic for me now, and I'm trying to turn it into something positive.
Who has the power right now to really change the justice system as you see it?
Well, I think that the incoming president might actually do something, because it's just a financial sinkhole. We spend $270 billion a year attacking American citizens through prosecutors' offices, and then $80 billion, according to Attorney General Eric Holder, these are not my numbers, they're his, keeping them in prison. And almost half of them are there for marijuana, which is now legal in 29
Well, what
states.
about President Obama? He made this an issue. He talked about this. Why did he not take any action?
Well, I don't know. He was a great disappointment to me, because I really, really, really believed he would do something about it. And now here at the end, he's let a few hundred people go. And that's, out of the millions and millions, the 71 million who have gotten a scarlet F. 1 out of every 4 Americans now has a criminal record, again, according to the Department of Justice. It's like pouring a bucket of goldfish in the Atlantic Ocean and saying, "Oh, I restocked it." It's nothing.
In your view, what should be the number? How many Americans probably should be in prison right now compared to how many are?
Well, you'd have to let go almost every prisoner in America to get us down to the per capita rate of communist China. That gives you some idea. They have 1.17 million in prison. We got 7.3 million under supervised release, and they have 4 times the number of citizens. So, we're in uncharted waters. We got 5% of the world's population, but the land of the free has 25% of its prisoners. I mean, no nation in history has ever put more of its own citizens in prisons than the United States. And it's simply due to an absolute dearth of due process of law. What they must do is still in the Constitution, still the law, but for the last 4 decades, prosecutors and judges, like the ones that did this to me, are completely immune. That immunity needs to be revoked.
Okay.
When these people
what about all the violent criminals we have in the system? What do you propose we do with them?
They're only between 4 and 5%, depending on the estimates. I mean, 47% of the people arrested and put in jail are there for marijuana. I mean, come on. I was in college back in the 70s, and a guy didn't take a head off a joint and say, "Hey, let's go kill somebody." It was, "Oh, wow, man, isn't that flower pretty?" I mean, come on. These are not dangerous people, and the estimate of the Department of Justice is that only between 4 and 5% of the people in prison today are there for violent crimes. So let's put the people away that we're scared of, not the people we don't like.
Do you think Americans really want this kind of a revolution in our justice system?
No, because we've been brainwashed. I mean, it's a very, very, very major industry now. It's like in California, Dick Gray Davis ran several years ago on doing or not signing 3 strikes, where a guy can steal tube of toothpaste, you go to prison for the rest of his life into law. But then the Corrections Officers Union of California gave him $1 million to change his mind if he got elected, and another $1 million after he got elected. And he decided to sign it anyway. So now the prison population exploded. So we can take it back. Here's the simple answer. Let me get down to the bottom line of how we can really fix this country. It's just one thing. We got to take our representatives back from the corporate control they have now enjoyed in Washington for years. And it wasn't just Citizens United versus FEC that started it. I mean, it was back to 1886 as it was described in Justice Restored to give the whole history. But here's the idea. Nobody should be able to bribe or buy my representative except for someone who lives in the district where they're running for office and has the right to vote for them.
So you think this is mostly about money? Is that what's happening here?
Oh, absolutely. The prison industry is one of the most powerful in America now. I mean, they're not as big as the military industrial complex that has kept us in 181 military conflicts since World War II, never declared. But the prison industry is bumping on the top. It's the fastest growing industry in America. So yes, there's money behind it, and some of the biggest owners of the prison industry companies like Wackenhut. Well, Disney's one of the biggest owners, for example. So Mickey Mouse is in the prison industry business. Wackenhut, Corrections Corporation of America. These guys are owned by the 5 big media companies, largely. They're huge holders of them. So, it's cheap news. You say there's a saying in the media industry, of which I was a part at one time in my life, if it bleeds, it leads, because that's cheap news. You put a camera and a talking head in front of an apartment building.
Right. Howell Woltz with us on WILS. One last thing, Howell, I want to ask you about what happens after prison. You said 71 million Americans have been convicted of crimes. What happens when you get out, you try to get back to life? What is that like?
Absolutely miserable. It's a second sentence that, again, was added in 1994. The very smart system was parole. Within your sentence, if you get a 10-year sentence and you're seen to not be a danger to society, or you're doing the right things, then they used to let you go. You go back home, you pay taxes, you're with your family, marriage has survived. But now that's been done away with, and they attach a second sentence called supervised release, where they can drag you back to fill a bed at any time for minor violations like writing a letter to another prisoner, or all these, not legal, the rules of halfway houses and supervised release agents, and they can then send you back at any time. So it's just horrible. The system has to be reversed, because America is better than this. We don't want to be the incarceration nation. Let's get back to the land of free. But what happens to those people is they can't affect the conversation, Michael, because when you're tagged with this scarlet F, you lose your right to vote.
When you're a felon, can you get back to a successful life in your view? Is that possible? Well,
I was more fortunate than others because I was, from a well-to-do family. My family helped me. I got back on my feet since, we proved the government's crimes. They've had to actually give me back some of what they stole from me 10 years ago. So, I'm living cheaply over here. I've married a beautiful, wonderful woman in Poland, and I'm happy and content. But for most people, the story's not that great, and that's why we have this 2/3 recidivism rate. You can't get rid of a scarlet F, and you can't vote to change things, so the politicians don't care about you anymore. Your constitutional rights are robbed from you. Those inalienable rights become alienable when you're attacked by the federal and state government.
Will you ever come back to the U.S., Hal?
I think maybe after the change of president, because the U.S. attorneys and people who were involved in these crimes against me are all going to lose their job January 20th. So, I wasn't a big fan of the man who won. I was less of a fan of the one who lost, but I think he may actually do something because it would be financially prudent. And this guy's a businessman. You can't spend $270 billion attacking your own citizens and $80 billion keeping them in jail just to support your donors. That makes no fiscal sense, and it's also destroying your nation when you disenfranchised 1 out of every 4 people.
Howell Woltz, the brand new book, Justice Restored, 10 Steps to End Mass Incarceration in America. Howell, it's been incredibly enlightening. Thank you very much for joining us on WILS.
Thank you so much for having me on, Michael.
You are listening to 25,000 Watt 1320 WILS. I'm Michael Cohen. We'll be right back with more.